Hello and welcome to the 21st Century Work-Life podcast, where we talk about how the world of work and our attitudes to work are changing. To get in touch and for more information on the show, head over to virtualnotdistant.com. Hello and welcome to episode 344, the first episode of 2024. Hey, lots of fours in today's episode. My name is Pilar, in case we haven't met before. And if we have, it's lovely to have you back. Regular listeners will have noticed that the tagline at the beginning of the show has changed. And this is what this episode is about. It's a short solo episode where I'm just going to let you know how the show is going to evolve and why, and what we're up to. So yeah, stick around for a little bit. So if you managed to listen, if you came across the very short episode I recorded by the sea early on, you might remember that I said we're going to be shifting a little bit away from remote work. Now, let's face it, I've been really embedded in a network of people advocating for remote work. I have been thinking about how to work through technology for many years. I still essentially, I'm a solo person now, but I do work with people across the world. I do all my work through the computer. I use the internet to communicate with everyone. So let's face it, at least for the first few months, we're not going to drop talking about remote work at all. In fact, I still have some guests pending and some recordings pending, which still focus on that. But I do want to shift the show to its original topic, which is 21st century work life. And a couple of reasons for that. One is that I often find out about people who are doing other stuff, and I meet people who are doing interesting things, but they don't fit within the remote work thing. And I think, oh, that's a shame. I would love to have them on the podcast, because that's my main way of getting to know people and of having conversations that I want to have. So I'm looking forward to that. I'm looking forward to bringing guests that joined us for the first 50 or 100 episodes. I'm looking forward to catching up with current guests. And to be honest, I'm looking forward to catching up with some of my friends as well, which I hope will provide some interesting insights to you. So it will evolve. There's a couple of things. One is I want to go weekly with the show. And what that means is that the remote and leading remote teams will still feature heavily anyway. So that's one. The other is that Maya Middlemiss will stay as co-host. And what I think is going to happen is we'll keep the What's Going On episodes, because although there are a lot of shows that focus on remote work and a lot of shows that talk about remote work, I don't think there are that many shows with a commentary on what's going on. Not many shows where people, instead of sharing stories or giving advice, there are not many shows where people just grab a piece of news and talk about it. I don't know if that's because the audience, you are not that interested in it, or because podcasters are not that interested in it. But Maya and I are. And so at least for a while, we will carry on getting together once a month and talking about something that's caught our eye. We'll see again how that evolves. Now, those of you who've been connected to Virtual Not Distant or myself for a while might be signed up to the newsletter. And you can sign up over at virtualnotdistant.com. Right at the bottom, there's a sign up form. I have a newsletter that I put out every month with reading recommendations, audio recommendations, and a digest of our own work. And I thought it'd be quite nice, and it's something I've been wanting to do for a while. I thought it'd be quite nice to bring that into the show. So once a month, I'll pop in and I'll tell you about what's in the newsletter. I'll give you, again, some commentary, some thoughts, what I'm up to, what I'm thinking. It will be a short show, she says. I did back in November the Napot Pomo challenge, which was the challenge was to podcast every day. And I did that over in Adventures in Podcasting. And I managed to do that. I managed to release a short episode every day. So I think that now I can do the weekly thing. So hopefully we'll have 2 or 3 meaty episodes, and then one will just be me, a bit like today. Another reason why I want to go broader into the world of work is because one of the things that I think the pandemic did, and this big uptake of remote work, was it opened up the minds for new ways of working. So, for example, we've heard a lot about the 4-day week, and that is actually now a thing. And there's a lot of commentary about it, but it's also now not unusual for a lot of people. I was on as a guest on a podcast called La Gran Renuncia, which is the Great Resignation, and it's run by 2 hosts in Argentina, in rural. They podcast from rural Argentina. I love the conversation with them. It's going to be out at some point this month, January 2023. If you speak Spanish, check it out. I was blown away. We touched on lots of stuff, and I hope we talk again. One of the things that came up was when we were talking about asynchronous communication in particular within remote work, but also other aspects of remote work, is that it's still not by many people taken as seriously as traditional ways of working, mainly due to not having experimented enough, not having implemented things that make it as good in certain contexts as in-person work. So I think there's still a lot to be done around that. And if we can start to see remote work, online collaboration as part of other new ways of working, I think that will be an interesting thing to explore as well. When we say explore, we mean talk about it and get people and give our opinions on. Talking about this experimentation, one of the things that we talked in La Gran Renuncia was why so many organizations now were saying, right, let's go back to the office. And it is this sense that a lot of people don't have time to experiment, and organizations and people in organizations haven't had time to experiment properly with remote work. We had what remote was before the pandemic, what it was during the pandemic, and there's still an urgency to get back to how it should be rather than seeing and feeling. That is the luxury of time that many people don't have. Now, because I have the luxury of time, I can experiment, which is what I'm going to do with the podcast. So I would really welcome your feedback, your thoughts. I sense a lot as I podcast, especially, and actually through my career, I sense a lot of what works, what doesn't, but there's nothing like people telling you. So Pilar at virtualnotdistant.com. It would be wonderful to hear from you. And then this is now more personal news, more virtual, not distant news, is I'm experimenting being a writer and a podcaster now. Those of you who know me know that I started my professional career as an actress and as a theatre practitioner, and I used to run a theatre company. I've worked as a voiceover for many years, then went into training and facilitation, and I'm pulling right back into my introverted self. And for those of you who know me as well, we might have had a conversation about how I would love to be a modern philosopher. And I'm going to try doing that. But I'm experimenting what that means as a person who wants to write and podcast, to explore, I hate that word, but I'm going to use it, to explore what they think through communicating with others, because I think that's why I love writing and podcasting, because in communicating with others, even asynchronously like we're doing now, I explore what I'm thinking, and it really helps me. I really like it. So there is 2 sides to the artist, and I am an artist, I'm a creator. The artist has to continue developing themselves and their art, and the artist has to survive in the real world. So I'm playing with what is it that is something I can do for no income, and what can I do for income? So I've got loads of different projects going on. Podcasting for now, I have decided is not going to be an income generation. It's very difficult to earn proper money through podcasting. You have to be very focused, and I've got 3 shows. all 3 shows, there's lots of people talking about them. If you're curious, this one, 21st Century Work Life, Management Cafe, which some of you might be really interested in if you're not listening to it already, which I'm co-hosting with Tim Burgess, and then Adventures in Podcasting, which is just me talking to podcasters and sharing my podcasting experiences. Within all those 3 topics, there's lots of people doing very good education stuff, information stuff, etc. And I think that in order to make the podcast the vehicle for income as well as expression, it takes a certain focus that I'm not prepared to give. And such is the problem of the 21st century creative. What a great problem to have. And then there's the writing. I am someone, again, who, I've written in all the buckets that I have been interested in. You can find a book of mine about it. They're not great works of art, literature, or nonfiction because they're basically where I was at that moment. And I talked about what I needed to talk about. And something I've discovered is that I want to be able to write to express myself. And that sometimes has very little value or has a lot of value for very few people. But I also have a lot of knowledge that I think I can pass on. But I'm not very good at that. I'm not very good at writing how-to books, for example. So I'm working on 2 projects at the moment. One is my All the World's a Workplace on Shakespeare, which is going to be more of it's basically my opinion on the world of remote and the world of online, touching on from asynchronous communication right to co-working spaces, etc., leadership, all of that. But I'm going to do that basically for myself and for anyone else who's interested in hearing what I have to say. But I've now started to develop what I'm calling the Collective Wisdom Guides for Remote Workers. It's a co-creation with GPT-4. GPT-4 for the moment, little bits of Claude, and we'll see what else comes up that's interesting. And that is looking at more narrow topics for the remote worker where I have an interest, but I don't have all the expertise I think someone writing a book should have. So I'm teaming up with the collective wisdom from the material that has trained ChatGPT. So as you know, ChatGPT has been given loads of words, and the copyright stuff and all of that we'll leave for later because that's an evolving topic as well. It's very interesting. But ChatGPT has been fed loads of words from all over the internet. And when you talk to it, it predicts what the next word should be. And basically what it's doing is, on what it's been trained, it's coming up with some words. Which means that if you prompt it in the right direction and if you work with it to create the words, it's got a lot of information. It's got a lot of knowledge. And you can then, as a writer, grab all that knowledge, edit it, and put something out into the world. So I've done that. The ebook is out. I'm still finishing the paperback. The Remote Worker's Guide to Time Management by Sam Byte. And I've decided to use a pen name because Sam Byte is half me, half technology, half generative AI. And it's got a different voice to me. I have to say, the wonderful Mark Kilby, who, if you listen to the show, will have met many times on the podcast, he gave me some feedback and he was saying one of the things he was missing from the book was my own experience, my own stories. There are fictional stories in the book. There's bits of research. It's all in there as a how-to book. But Mark said, I'm missing your stories. And what was interesting was that as I was editing and writing with ChatGPT, some stories came to mind about time management, how I use my time, my perception of time, how I procrastinate. And I very deliberately didn't put those in. And I said to Mark, this is a Sam Byte book, and I'm keeping my own experiences for my books. So just to say, I mean, I could do an episode. I will do an episode on the 21st century writer, nonfiction writer, because there's a lot to say about that. And we will have a new website. My lovely Kate, who's always designed, who used to design when we were both working in the theatre in London. We used to work together then, and we still work together. We are looking at keeping the structure of the website as it is. And recently I got some feedback saying that as a resource website, it was fantastic. So I was very pleased with that. That's what it is now. Virtual Not Distant is a place for you to look for information and information educational products. So have a look if you haven't seen it yet, virtualnotdistant.com. We're going to change the look of it a bit. I'm not going to tell you much about it because we're still playing with the idea, but I'm really excited. So that to say, this is enough for a solo show. As you can see, doing a podcast episode a day means you train yourself to be able to talk for a very long time on your own about stuff. It would be wonderful to hear what you think, especially if you've been listening to the show for a while and you have anything to add about format, topics, guests, etc. Please let me know that you're a listener if you email me, especially if you're pitching yourself or someone else for the show, because I get lots of pitches that say they've listened to the show and it's obvious they haven't. But it would be horrible if you are one of those people and I think you haven't listened. So I don't know, say code word potato or something like that. Okay, so my email address is pilar@virtualnotdistant.com. You can also use the contact form over at virtualnotdistant.com. You can sign up to the newsletter there if that's of interest. And wherever you are, whatever you're doing, enjoy.